repeat the non-conformist oath. I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. I promise not to repeat things other people say.
Welcome to another episode of Positive Blatherings with Fitz, where I try to talk about positive things and success. And some of the people that I bring on this show amaze me. And today is definitely a perfect example of that because we have none other than Stephanie Harlowe here. And she is the host of Crime Weekly, a podcast, and she's also a very popular crime. What is it? It's you have a YouTube channel that you solve crimes, and it's like how do you describe it?
I don't know. They call us true crime YouTubers.
True crime?
But we don't, well, at least I don't claim to solve crimes.
Oh, you don't solve them. You just tell people about the mysteries and about the crimes and how they were solved and things like that?
Yeah, it's more to bring awareness to them, especially the unsolved ones, because they're unsolved, but there's evidence. And it's always kind of that thing where, here's what the suspect looked like, or here's where she was last seen. So you kind of put it out there and you say, somebody out there somewhere might know something about this, and if even one person on one of these videos comes forward and gives some information that's helpful and helps to bring the family of this person closure, then I think that's a win.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I do with this podcast is I go into it kind of like a clean slate. Like, I don't know much about you except for the fact that you were in our movie Bottom Feeders. thebottomfeedersmovie.com. But and you know, I met you through other people, but after I learned a little bit about your story and what you do, and that you're like super famous on the internet and whatnot, I wanted to have you in here because I know that what you do online and you're following your passion for true crime has become like a legit career for you. And that just blows my mind to think about that. And so I wanted to learn more about your journey and how you got there and sort of, you know, what maybe stumbling blocks there were along the way, or what are some of the things that you had to overcome to get there, and, you know, how positivity worked into that. How did your mindset factor into your success? So first of all, how did you get involved with the true crime genre? Like, how did you find that passion?
Well, that's always been a passion of mine. I was always a morbid child.
Okay.
Even from a very young age, far younger than I should have been thinking about death, I was. They call that mortality salience, right? When you reach the point in your life where you realize one day you're going to die. You're not supposed to get there very, very young, you know, because it's traumatic. It's a traumatic realization. I got there real young. I think I was maybe 5 or 6.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, and I don't know what prompted it. It wasn't like I lost a relative and somebody had to explain to me, and then I was like, oh, no, you know. I just, it was strange. And that's always been a fear of mine. Death is my greatest fear. It's the only thing I fear, and it's the only thing you really can't escape from, right?
Exactly, yeah.
So that's always been something. But I almost turned that fear into, you know, I guess something productive. And then I was a writer, too, from a very young age. I would write these incredibly morose and sad poems at like 7 and 8. And my mom would say, this is really good, but maybe write something, you know, more uplifting. She was worried. But it's just, I lived in the darkness, but it made me appreciate the light better. Being afraid of death makes you appreciate that you're alive.
Sure.
Right? Makes you want to kind of seize every day and seize every moment. So when I kind of transitioned that, I guess it started with vampires. I was also reading Anne Rice way before I should have. My brother read Anne Rice. He's 10 years older than me. So I was probably about 8 or 9 when I grabbed him.
Wow, that's heavy stuff for an 8 or 9-year-old.
Yeah, but it's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Nobody did vampires like Anne Rice. So I grabbed them out of his room when he went to the Marines, and I was like, well, he's not using these, and he had all of them. And, then I started reading about the vampires and the witches. Anne Rice had a great Mayfair Witch series, The Witching Hour. And then I loved writing, and then I wanted to write books and things. So my interest in true crime and writing, they kind of came together because I was always a writer first. The first time I got really into true crime, though, was the H.H. Holmes story. I read this book called Devil in the White City. I think I was about 18 years old. And, come to find now, this many years later, the most of the stuff in that book was not accurate. It was all embellished. But, as a 17, 18-year-old, I was like, whoa, this stuff is crazier than this nonfiction is crazier than fiction. The real stories can be just as insane and like just grab you as much as something fictional can be. And that's when I started to get really big into history. I love history.
Yeah.
So that kind of all came together for me because on my channel, we talk about true crime cases that are current, but also past true crime cases. The Black Dahlia, Charles Manson, H.H. Holmes. And I really love to cover those past stories because I'm able to bring in the history of the area, why these people did this, and how maybe the culture and the times and the place they were living in at the time that it happened affected who they were and what they went on to do, and sort of like build the story and build the scene. That's my favorite part. So when I started on YouTube, I wasn't doing true crime. I was doing makeup and skincare because that's what everybody else was doing.
And when was this?
Oh, I don't know. So my youngest daughter is 4 now. I probably started. I wanted to start doing YouTube because I didn't want to go back to work after I had her. I didn't want to. I was like,
who does? Who
nobody.
does?
I wanted to be home with her. I love that little thing.
Sure.
So I said, well, I'm going to make it big on YouTube like all these people are. And then I can stay home and work from home and it's going to be great. Nobody really understands how much work goes into it. It's not just sitting down and talking and then boom, overnight,
right.
You're like, got 2 million subscribers. So I started doing makeup and skincare because that just seemed like what was popular. And then about, 6 months into that, I was like, okay, I love makeup and skincare, but I feel like this is so boring. How many things can you say about a blush? How many different lipsticks? Right. This is so redundant. And I don't know how these people do it. For years, they talk about makeup. For years, they put makeup on in front of a camera. And it was just so soul crushing. I felt like my brain just was, dying.
Yeah.
So I said, well, I'm gonna put a true crime video out on my channel, and I'm still working at this point, because I'm waiting to blow up so I can quit my job and be with my family. And I said, I'll just put out a true crime video, and I was like, if people like it, they'll watch it. If they don't, then I'll know that they don't like that. And everybody around me was like, no, that's a bad idea. They were like, you have a niche. Like, how many people who like makeup are going to like murder stories? And I was like, well, I do. I
right,
like
so
both.
maybe there's more of you.
I like both those things, right?
Exactly.
And I said, well, it's my channel. What have I got to lose? I only have 2,000 subscribers. What's going to happen? So I put out my first video was actually about a local case to Rochester, a Jane Doe that was found, I think in like the 70s.
Is that the one that they just have been talking about recently, like within the last year?
I think so. Caledonia, Jane Doe? Yeah. So that was my first.
That was your first one?
Yeah.
Very cool.
My first one, and people loved it. They loved it. And, come to find out, the majority of people who are interested in true crime are women. So. Yeah.
I learned that watching this Netflix documentary Where I Saw You, which was very cool. When you popped up on the screen, I'm like, oh, I know her. That's Stephanie.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. But, and I started listening to a couple of true crime podcasts as well, just a little bit, not a whole lot. And I started to look into it, and I did see that it's majority of women that are interested in that subject. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. That's a question.
It's an interesting phenomenon.
It's a question a lot of people have asked. I mean, people have asked in general, why is anybody interested in true crime, right?
Right. I mean, I am. I just like the Black Dahlia. I just recently went through a bunch of books about a guy who claims it was his father. The
George Hodel.
Yeah, the Hodel. Like that. Of course, But like when I first read about that, I found a website called Black Dahlia Solution, and the guy had it all figured out. And I was like, this is amazing. And it's a rabbit hole that I totally, because I'm like you, I love history. Anything history, I just get absorbed in it, and weeks go by, and I'm like, wow, I just completely lost so much time. But I think it's amazing that you turn this into something that you can do all the time.
Yeah, well,
as a job almost.
And I think for instance, that gentleman who says his father did it, I'm not saying that his father didn't. He's got some great proof and evidence. And the worst part, the LAPD, and anybody who watches my videos or listens to me knows that I hate the LAPD more than any other police entity on this planet. They are the worst police officers in the
planet. Are they just corrupt or sloppy? And
they're super lazy. They're super corrupt. They've notoriously covered things up. Like I did a 6-part series on the Manson family. And right off the get, like before Manson even came into the picture, you've got Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys and Terry Melcher, who would go on to be a producer, Doris Day's son. And they get pulled over when they're like 19 years old by the LAPD because they're speeding and they're drinking and they have a gun. Terry Melcher has a gun. And the officers are like, oh, yes, Terry, we know who you are, Mr. Melcher. You're Doris Day's son. We're just going to take your gun and then just come and get it at the station later and, drive careful. They knew who you were, if you were a star, if you were a famous person. They knew who you were, if you had parents who were famous, and you were treated differently. And that's how they've always been. It's the worst. I mean, I'm sure maybe they've gotten better. Probably they haven't. They haven't. And I saw that in the docu-series for Elisa Lam too, but that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But for the LAPD still has Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia's file, under lock and key. No one can get to it. Why?
Yeah, exactly.
Why?
That is very confusing. And there was a lot of speculation about going back with the DA at the time and all of that stuff. And the
DA at the time wanted to. The DA at the time believed, I think his name is Steve Hodel, George Hodel's son.
He was an investigator with the LAPD, and he was saying pretty much the same thing that you were saying in his books about how just horrible the LAPD was, the homicide unit.
So why is that file still on lock and key?
Right, exactly.
You can't blame people for speculating that something shady is going on when this happened in the 1930s.
Right.
And you still won't let anybody see her file, even legit people like the DA and people are trying to investigate, not even like web sleuths, but just anybody. What's up with that? So they're very they're corrupt, but they're hiding something with that case. It bugs me so much. And then they're all like, why do these people speculate? Why is everybody freaking out? Because you guys are acting sketchy.
Right. And think about it. So this is something that you do all the time, right? You look at these cases, you probably see earmarks, right? You see something like, oh, I saw this in another case where this happened.
All the time.
So things start to point to, oh, well, I bet you the cops are doing this or this happened because I saw it with that case. If you do it enough, you start to see the signs and you start to know what you're talking about. I mean, I think it's kind of a bad thing for anyone to downplay like web sleuth, as a derogatory term, because it's something that you do all the time. So I would consider you maybe an expert, but I don't even know if you're considered an amateur expert just because maybe you didn't go to detective school. Mm-hmm. But, a lot of these things with anybody with a half a brain can see the evidence and can see
it's
where
a pattern.
things.
Yeah,
it's definitely, there's a lot of patterns and you get used to reading those patterns.
Yeah, and in the show, the Elisa Lam show, people are making fun of me online, but that's the downside of being in the public eye.
Sure.
You have lots of haters, but they're making fun of me online for saying I've seen lots and lots of autopsy reports and I've never seen one that looked like this. Why are you making fun of me? I've seen hundreds of autopsy reports. They're released to the public. Anybody can see them. I've seen hundreds and I've never seen one that looked like that. This is a fact.
They crossed it out.
Where they crossed it out. Do a new one. How unprofessional are you? Like, don't be sketchy and then ask why everyone's asking why you're sketchy. And then the police, the LAPD, they're like, oh, and that was the thing that bothered us about how she was in the water tank, but she wasn't discovered for 18 days. They said they checked that Cecil Hotel from top to bottom, except for the water tanks. I promise you, if a web sleuth was up on that roof, we would have been climbing up there like monkeys looking in that water tank. Right. I promise you, we would have checked those water tanks. And that's always bugged me. And I argued with my husband. He's like, well, I wouldn't have. And I was like, what? Then you shouldn't be a police officer if you're not willing. He's like, it's high and dangerous. And I'm like, well, you shouldn't be a police officer if you're not willing to take that risk. That's not the job for you. You're there to find this girl. She sat in the water tank for 18 days. People were drinking water that she was in. Her parents were devastated. I'd rather know my child was dead than to not know where she was or what was happening to her.
Yeah.
For 18 days, her parents didn't know. And the policeman in the documentary, he was like, I'm so torn up about it. Can't you see?
I want to see how many takes it took him to do that, right?
To do what? He didn't even look like he had any emotion.
Right. That was the best one. That was the best
that was it. They were like, all right, dude. All right, Jonesy, get out of here. We can't get any actual emotion from you. But so that was when I looked at YouTube and the true crime community, not that it was bad. For me, what you need to do if you want to succeed on YouTube is you need to find what's missing and fill that hole.
Right.
That's what I did. So I loved that there was true crime on YouTube because I didn't know that other people liked it in the way I did. I didn't know until I found these things on YouTube, and then I was like, oh my gosh, this is a community. There's a lot of people who are into this stuff, and I feel like I found my people now. But the videos that I was finding were good, but they were like 25 minutes each. And it would leave me wondering, well, what happened to that one guy that you brought up? And then you said that they checked into him, but then he disappeared. Where did he go? Or, what happened to her belongings? You said the police took her cell phone, but you never told me what was in the cell phone. Like, I had questions and I felt like I had to do my own research afterwards. So I said, well, why don't I make a video where people don't feel like they have to do their own research? Like, they feel like they're sitting there and they're listening to a story from beginning till end, and they don't have questions. And that way we can get to just breaking it down in the comments together, so nobody has to feel like they have to go and find out more. I'm going to give you everything, even the details you didn't think were important, because in these cases, every small, minor detail is important. It's like a puzzle. It's a Rubik's Cube, and I love it. I love putting all the pieces together. I mean, in my office, I've got police reports, crime files, mug shots, social media activity printed out, and I've got it all up on a board, and it's just the most amazing thing to start with a blank slate of a case and start adding everything in and putting it together. But I do consider myself more of a storyteller rather than I'm trying to solve this. If it gets solved because of the speculations, I'm not sitting here like calling people and being like, you need to tell me what you know about this.
Right.
No. Although I might if I might do it if I was compelled to. Yeah, it's not off the table. But in general, I think that what's the harm in taking a case that's unsolved and thinking outside of the box or bringing new brains in on it? What's the worst that could happen?
Yeah. Did you know how to do the research before? Or did you just sort of like happen into it? I mean, I know doing research, you think that it's you just look up stuff, but I wouldn't know I wouldn't know really how to get an autopsy report. I mean, I guess I would think about it and go, well, the coroner's office, do I, contact the county? And there's a lot of things that that you've learned over time after doing this stuff. So take yourself back to the first one. The first time you were trying to find stuff out, were you like walking around in the dark, or did you have a good sense of what to do?
I was walking around in the dark, and that's why it took me a little bit longer at first to do cases, because not that I was going to say, oh, I'm just not going to put this in. I would just have to figure out how to find it. Right. And there's a lot of things you can do. There's legal websites for like lawyers and stuff, case law, LexisNexis, things like that you can access, and you can find, even if it's not related to the case, if it's related to somebody involved in the case, it gives you some background on them. You can go in and usually if the police release the autopsy reports, and they'll release like redacted police files, you can find those through, what is that one website I use? It's awesome. Oh, I can't think of it now, but it's so Scribed. Scribed is another website, SCRIBD. Yeah. So it usually has like articles and stuff, but if you type in certain names, it'll pull that stuff up because people load that stuff up in there for you. And background check websites. You've seen those like Verify Me and stuff like that. I use those constantly, and it's a very big source.
The kind for like $3 you can find every phone number anyone's ever had kind of thing.
Yes, but I'm not so much interested in their phone
Right,
number
right.
as in do they have a criminal history. So if this guy's a suspect in murdering his girlfriend, they're not going to necessarily always say if he's got a criminal background, but I'm going to find out if he does. And if it's a criminal background of like, oh, he smoked weed, I'm going to say that's probably not related. But if he's got a criminal background of domestic abuse,
Sure.
maybe related.
Right. Exactly.
But and it's also just filling in holes. So I make an outline, and then I'm like, okay, what am I missing here? And then I'll just specifically go and search for those things. Sometimes I talk to people. I've reached out to the victims' families. I have a lot of great relationships with the families of victims because I come out and I'm like, hey, I'm going to cover this. I want to be the most respectful to your loved one as possible. Most importantly, I want to know who this person was before I even start talking about how they died. I want to know how they lived. What was their favorite color? What was their favorite cereal when they were 6 years old? What was their favorite TV show to watch? What was the cutest thing they did? I want to know everything about this person. And that's creating a three-dimensional, fleshed out portrait, not just a story. And that's what is really missing from true crime on network television. It's all sensationalized, like, oh, she died. She was raped, murdered, shot. It was horrible. Like, now here's the investigation. They spend a whole 30 seconds talking about the actual victim. And in my opinion, that's the most important part of the story. We need to know who this person was. So then when you're listening to the story, it hits you.
Yeah.
This person could have been my daughter. This person could have been my mother, my sister. And I want people to feel as invested in the cases when they're listening to them as they would be if it was their family member. So that's, I think, what sets me apart, because some might say I spend too much time going into the background of the victim and trying to figure out who they were. But I think that's what you do when you're a storyteller and you're trying to really make people feel it and be there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a humanity thing. You really, I love that. That's a great angle because, like you said, a lot of that is sensationalized. It's more about the gore of it and not so much about who that person was. I'm sure the families really appreciate that too, because that's probably the most anyone's ever spent trying to understand the victim and where they were coming from and how they lived their life.
Yeah, I mean, imagine it's your child or your wife, how do you want them to be portrayed?
Right.
And so many times the families of the victims will work with these networks and they'll spend, and I've seen this firsthand, they'll spend hours interviewing them about their loved one.
And then they use a little tiny piece of it.
10 seconds of it makes it in. And that hurts them. It's like almost like, why would you even waste this time having me recount this, relive this?
Right.
If it's not going to be for something so that the world hears who my child, my wife, my loved one was. Well, what's the point of making me live through that again? It's really horrible. And that's why I will never actually work with network television. And I've had offers to go on shows and be a part of that. But I've seen that it is more about the money, more about the clicks, more about the views. How many people can we get? How can we get this to number one? Sort of thing, rather than focused on the person. And I don't know why, because I really think that if networks spend more time diving into that, I think people would appreciate it. I know they appreciate it on my channel. My subscriber base is growing specifically because of that and because of the way I tell the story. I don't know why they think that's maybe they don't have the time. I mean, they've got 45 minutes. I have as long as I want. That's the greatest thing. I can make 7 hours about a case and,
You're also the only one. You're your own editor. You're your own, you decide what's on there. And in network television, there's like 50 other people who have a say. You know what I mean? So, and everybody's got opinion.
Yeah,
everybody has an opinion. So it's
Yeah, I saw that.
I bet you a lot of them would like to be doing it on their own.
They can, right?
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Now they can. That's a good segue. You figured it out. You started doing it. You started following that passion of the true crime videos on YouTube. Was there an early setback? Was there something that didn't work out right, or maybe got you thinking, geez, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing this? Is this the right path for me?
It was more just time, and that's always been my biggest issue. I'm my own worst enemy. I get obsessive about things. So when I'm working on a case, that's all I want to do. It's like nothing else matters. And I had to really learn because obviously that wasn't a great situation for my husband and my
Sure.
kids.
Sure.
So I had to learn to balance that, and that still is to this very day the hardest thing for me, to mentally disconnect and be with my family. So they say like, oh, it must be great. You work from home. You can just, work whenever you want. No, it was way easier when I was 9 to 5. I punched out, I was done. I didn't think about work for the rest of the night. Now it's like it's invested. It's my baby. It's mine. I want it to be perfect. That's the only thing, because it does take a lot of time, especially the long form videos that I do. They take weeks of research, hours of writing to get it just right, hours of editing, hours of recording. So there's very little time left over for any personal pursuits, because you've got your family you want to give your attention and love to, and then your work that you want to give your attention and love to. So you really, you don't have much time for anything else. So that's the only thing. There was the haters online. Up until recently, they've never really bothered me. I've always been this eternally optimistic person. Like you had asked me earlier, how a lot of people don't make it on YouTube because they don't get that immediate gratification. You got to be there for like a year before anything happens.
Right.
You're definitely not making any money. Definitely not. You have to put a lot of time and work into something that's not giving you anything back. And a lot of people find that difficult. For me, I've always been, I've failed at so many things, but I never have been like, oh, I failed at this, I suck.
Right.
I've always been like, oh, I
That
failed
didn't
at
work.
this.
Let's try again.
On to the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's so important, though. That's so important, because I think a lot of people, when they view failure as the end, as and all it is really is changing your direction.
Yeah.
Like if you go and you try something, it doesn't work. We're like, well, all right, we'll try something else. On to the next thing, like you said. That's so important for anything that you do. Think about how many things in your daily life that oh, I can't go this way. What am I going to go home? You go home and no, you find another way around to where you're going. Like this road's closed. What am I going to? Oh, forget it. Pull over and go to sleep.
No, absolutely. And I mean, for a while there, because I was trying to find a way to stay home, my husband was like, all right, dude, you tried wood burning. It didn't work.
Wood burning? What's wood burning?
I'm a great wood burner, by the way.
Like burning in
like
designs
taking like
in
a
woods or
hot
something?
pen and like burning it into the wood.
Sweet.
I was making money, but it was just taking a lot of time. Like I'd make a set of Harry Potter coasters. It'd take like 2 weeks. So I'm not making the money I need to make to stay home.
Right.
So then I tried something else. I tried like buying stuff in the store and reselling it. And once again, I was making decent money, but I had to go to the post office all the time. And I was constantly, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And my husband's like, all right, man, like you gonna figure out like what you want to do? And I'm like, don't worry, it'll come any day now. It's gonna. And then later, just about a year ago, my husband was like, I'm sorry I made you feel bad about like trying different stuff, because you just needed to find like your niche. And I was like, that's all right, I don't care what you think. I was like, it didn't bother me, don't worry.
Me at all.
I didn't mean, I obviously care what he thinks.
Sure.
No, nobody's opinion of me has ever made me have less of an opinion of myself.
Sure.
And and that could be because I'm not only an eternal optimist, but maybe a little bit of a narcissist. Who knows? But I think in order to be successful, you kind of need to be a little about yourself.
You have to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you describe for me that moment where you realized that your true crime YouTube channel was it? Like there had to be a time where you were like, holy crap, this is like the real deal. Like we're doing this. Yeah.
So, I mean, once again, the narcissist, from the moment I started getting traction on those true crime videos, I was like, I'm calling my job. I'm done. I'm putting my 2 weeks. And my husband was like, hold on. And that's great, because he's the opposite of me. I'm like flying through the air. He's very grounded. His feet never leave the ground. Okay. Very like down to earth, thinks things through. And I do not. And he's like, hold on. Like, wait, the money's not coming in yet. You got to wait till the money comes in and then you can. And he said, if you're making as much as you were making at work, plus enough to cover health insurance, which you won't have anymore, you can stop working. And that had always been my main goal, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to work for these people anymore. I can't stand it.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, what do I need to do? How much do I have to put out? How much do I have to work to get to that goal? And once I reached that goal, it was amazing, because I was like, I'm done, guys. I'm not going to work anymore. So it was when I was making enough to supplement. And then I kind of knew like, oh, you can actually make a career out of this. insane. Like, I know people out there make money on YouTube. Some people make millions and millions and millions of dollars. I didn't want to make millions. I just wanted to make enough to stay home and be with my kids and be a mother. So that's what I achieved. And that's kind of when I knew, like, this could be my career. But then it became my business, which takes a lot more time and energy, and you want to build it, and you kind of want to branch out, and you want to strike when the iron's hot. And, you know, it's just been going nonstop, really, pretty much since that point. I've been to CrimeCon in New Orleans last year. It wasn't last year technically, because CrimeCon was supposed to be...
Was it 2019 you were there?
Yeah, 2019. That was
We
great.
seem to like skip over 2020 because we didn't do anything.
Yeah. Nothing happened. We were supposed
Absolutely.
to do CrimeCon this year, but it got canceled. Next year, it's in Austin. So this coming spring, I believe, June, it's in Austin. So we'll be going to that. I mean, I went to LA to be interviewed for the True Crime Daily podcast with Billy Jensen, who's like a big person in the true crime community. I was like over the moon about that. And then my husband and I hiked to Spawn Ranch, where the Manson family used to
wow,
live.
yeah.
We didn't know it was in the middle of the desert. He wore boat shoes.
Oh my God.
I had combat boots on because I always have combat boots on, no matter what the scenario. But
Smart.
I love them. He had boat shoes on, and we kept hearing like rustlings in the bushes.
It's like, yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, there's a
rattlesnakes
rattlesnake. And he was like, I can't believe that you brought me. I mean, we hiked. We had to climb on like hills.
Yeah, it's like in the middle of nowhere,
go into
right?
gullies. It's in the middle of nowhere, man. There's not a Spawn Ranch there anymore. It's just the rock where they used to hang out. And they took that picture that was on the front of the magazine, you know, that we wanted to get to that damn rock. And we did. After 45 minutes of sliding around in the desert, literally falling down like holes. And then he wasn't mad at me anymore because it was such a cool experience. He's not like a person who believes in like, oh, presence and spirits and stuff, and I am. I'm always like, oh, do you feel that? And he's like, nope.
Feel nothing. It's not
But
there.
we walked up to that rock, and he was like, I feel something. Like, this is insane.
How can you not? I mean, seriously, that is like, especially, you know, not even being in the true crime world.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such an iconic spot just in our history.
I know.
You know?
I know. It's insane.
You can't not feel something when you're there.
It was so cool. And then we went to the Museum of Death in LA, which is really interesting.
I used to follow a website called findadeath.com. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
And it has all of the like various, like, here's a picture of his mailbox when he lived here, and here's, you know, or autopsy reports or actual crime scene photos from when famous people died. I am sadly very fascinated by that stuff, always have been. So I can really relate to that morbidness that you had as a child. I don't know when it was that I started that. I think it was at some point in my early 20s that I just became fascinated with that stuff. And it really has to be, you know, sort of historic for me to care about it. Things that are somewhat recent, I'm not as interested in. But if it's like from the 30s or the 40s or in, especially like Hollywood, you know,
old Hollywood
stories and old Hollywood murder, death stuff, that keeps my attention for hours.
There's a great podcast I have to recommend for you then.
Okay. We'll do it after if you
Yeah. I'm trying to, I remembered it, but it's amazing. They cover all old Hollywood stuff. But I agree with you. I do think that even in the current cases, history and true crime are so linked, it's impossible to separate them. And that's just, I mean, I'll cover a case in Austin, and I'll talk about how Austin, Texas used to be this more like small town atmosphere and kind of like grunge and on the outskirts, and then it became gentrified. And, you know, this is why there's a frozen yogurt shop. These 3 girls were murdered in these 4 girls were murdered in this frozen yogurt shop. This frozen yogurt shop is here because of the fact that Austin used to be about like grunge bands and stuff like that, and it was a very big kind of counterculture scene, and then it became more like mainstream, as you know, especially as people started leaving California and going to Texas. So there's always a way, you know, to like roll the history in, because to me that's what gives it texture, right? Yeah.
Well, if you think about in the early stories that you're covering, a lot of the mystery about it is because the technology wasn't there at the time. Now you have DNA, you have all of these other things that can help solve a case quicker. Whereas back then you didn't have them.
But doesn't it make it more of a mystery today if we have this stuff like
and
DNA?
You can't.
And you
oh
still
yeah.
can't?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because with all of that, you still can't. Then yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But just going back to the historical stuff, and you think about, you try to apply see through today's lens, and you're like, wow, if they only had this, if they only had DNA, or if they were just smart, or stupid things like the detective for some reason didn't sweep for fibers or whatever it is,
Probably didn't.
Something that they usually do that's standard now, but back then they're like, oh yeah, we probably, and then it could be a completely different story. That's the kind of stuff that fascinates me, is that they were so close, especially ones that you solve, right? They were so close, but if they would only done that, they would have figured it out and not had to wait 40 years.
Yeah, that's frustrating. In some cases, never get solved, even though they have a plethora of DNA and evidence.
Yeah.
And that's more, I think, an issue of the police know who did it, but they don't think that they can get a conviction in court, so they can't arrest this person.
Right, so it
and
just
that's
stalls,
frustrating.
goes cold.
It's so frustrating. And you have the fact that every single crime lab in the United States has such a backlog of crime evidence to process that you could be, putting a case in and then you don't even get that processed until 2 years after the fact because there's such a backup. It's disgusting.
Wow.
It's unacceptable. And all the money that our government puts into the stupidest things, we can't put more money into hiring more people or training more people or getting more resources to solve crimes, because especially sexual assaults, the worst is you have a victim who's still alive and still has to walk around afraid for her life that this person is still out there. And her rape kit is sitting in a lab for a year and a half.
Because there's one dude that sits there analyzing this stuff and they don't have a staff.
Right.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
They don't have a staff, or, they don't have the time, or who knows.
But the department has a new tank.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for them.
Exactly. I don't understand. And it's so frustrating as a taxpayer. You should have a say in where your money goes.
Sure.
Something, You should you don't know. You're just like, yes, here, take half of my money. Do whatever you want with it. My streets have potholes all over them. I can barely drive without getting a flat tire. I don't know what you're doing with this stuff, but I trust you.
That's like 5 other podcast episodes too. So what's up for you now? What's on the horizon? What cool things are you working on?
Well, I'm busy with the podcast. We do that once a week, every Friday. Derek and I, he's the retired police investigator.
Yeah, tell me about your co-host for the podcast.
He's awesome. He puts up with a lot from me because I'm not anti-police. I'm anti-bad police, and
Sure.
I see a lot of them. So the case we were just doing that we just recorded a couple days ago, he doesn't feel the need to defend the police, but I'm always almost yelling at him.
He's a former police officer, right?
He's a representative. He's sitting right there, and I'm like, well, why is it like this? And why is it like this? And he's like, I agree with you. And I'm like, but why? And he's like, and I'm like, oh, what? I feel so bad. I don't mean to do that to him, but he's there, and I feel like this is an inside person, maybe somebody who will have answers for us. So I'm going to get them out of him.
Yeah.
But he's great because he's also talked about the whole lab backup, and we've actually discussed maybe starting something like a foundation that will help to, maybe do more training, hire more people, especially now, with small businesses closing, people out of work.
Yeah.
Who was interested in science? Somebody who's interested in science can't do their job anymore. If you said, hey, go to this training for 16 weeks and learn how to process samples at a crime lab, that would be great. You're helping out people, you're helping out victims. Let's bring everyone together and work as a community. So he's funny. So we get along really well. We had great chemistry right from the get-go. I mean, the first time we talked, I think he was born 2 days before me. So I think he's February 6th and I'm February 8th. So that may have had something to do with it. And we're the same age, so we have, the same kind of feelings. It's harder when you're with somebody who's significantly older or significantly younger.
You have the same cultural references and time period and everything, and I get it.
So you make a reference, and they're like, "What? Who's Elmo?"
You make a lot of Elmo references on
No.
the Crime Weekly podcast.
No.
I want to hear the Elmo story.
The Elmo story. I'm sure there's one out there. I'm sure Elmo's been involved in some crime.
Oh yeah, well, the recent Elmo, we heard all about him.
Yeah, right.
So you've got Crime Weekly podcast, and you're constantly updating your YouTube channel. How many subscribers do you have these days?
I think 430,000 now.
430,000. You
Yeah. hear
hear that? 1,000.
Yeah.
See, we're missing the 1,000 part of that.
It's
No, we have 26 subscribers to the Rockvox YouTube channel, and that's including my parents, I believe. They don't know they're subscribed. They don't even know what YouTube is, but it's fine.
Listen, that's how I started. I was like going to everybody. I'm like, subscribe to me, you know. And my mom was like, oh, I like it. And I'm like, you're not watching it, are you? She's like, it's hard. These are sad stories.
So sweet. So how does someone find you on YouTube?
Just type in Stephanie Harlowe. There's an E on the end of Stephanie and on the end of a Harlowe. Crime Weekly. You can find us anywhere podcasts are played. Spotify, Apple Podcasts. I don't know where else they are.
Maybe one of these days we can get you guys to come in and record an episode here just so I can say it happened.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That'd be cool.
Very
Stephanie Harlowe, Crime Weekly podcast, and on YouTube Star. Also, Aunt Shelley in Bottom Feeders, which will be coming out at some point. It's done. It's awesome. You do a great job in that. Do you act a lot? Have you acted a lot in the past?
In high school.
In high school?
You know, productions, singing, musicals, things like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like I act every day of my life, honestly. I'm such a dramatic human being in general. I always have. I
always
love
playing
it.
a part.
It was so much fun. Oh my God. The more outlandish the character, the better for me.
Oh yeah, Aunt Shelley was very outlandish.
Yeah.
I love
It was
creepy,
so fun.
creepily outlandish.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my husband was a little creepier than me. Right?
Oh yeah, just a lot.
Yeah.
Just a lot. Played by actor Jeremy London.
Definitely creepy.
So thank you so much for coming in. Your story is amazing. I applaud your tenacity and your perseverance of how you followed your passion and you figured out what you wanted to do and you went after it and you're making it happen. And that's what this is all about. It's about just like finding your dreams and going after them and sticking with it. So
Yeah, it is.
well done.
And there's something out there for everyone.
There is.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find that niche that's missing on YouTube. It takes a very special person to find what's missing because everything's there.
You just find what you like that's not there.
Right.
You should
What's not-
you should do movie reviews.
Oh,
Do you know how badly I want to do a movie review or a
You know how
TV
many-
show review channel?
You know how many there are though? There's I mean there's nothing missing in that genre.
I disagree because I'm watching them sometimes.
Oh, so they're all terrible.
And I'm
Well,
like,
that's the
well,
thing.
not all. So there's a couple
There's-
good ones.
yeah.
Like Chris Stuckman's amazing. But when I'm listening to them, I'm like, no, you completely missed what this meant. Like, that's not what that
Yeah.
meant. The flag did not mean that. It meant this. And because my husband, all the time, he'll be like, what's happening? And I always look at him, I'm just like, are we watching the same movie? Like, I don't understand how you missed this.
I
Like,
know exactly what you mean.
It's so frustrating. So I think that would be amazing. Like somebody who really knows
Yeah, that's
what
not
they're
me.
talking about.
That's not me.
Come on.
It's not me.
No.
Trust me. I'm the one that can watch a movie and be entertained and say, "Oh, that was cool." And then someone who's really into movies, really, I mean, yeah, I'm a filmmaker and
like
all that
analytical, pick them apart kind of
kind
thing.
of stuff. They'll go,
Yeah.
"Oh," blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, "Well, what about this character was so ridiculous?" I'm like, "Oh, he was funny."
Oh, so I don't like those people.
So I can
I don't like those people that are way too serious about it.
Yeah,
Because you
like-
can just watch a movie that's like bad, but they like filmed it well and it was produced well and the shots were good. But like, yeah, maybe the characters didn't make sense and maybe their dialogue didn't make sense, but you could still enjoy
I can
it.
still be entertained by movies where like for example, the Star Wars, right? The prequels. Everybody hates Phantom Menace. That's like the worst movie ever made. I'm like, it had some parts I didn't care for, like the whole Jar Jar thing or whatever, but I don't get angry about it and I can watch it and be entertained, and some parts about that movie I like.
Yeah. Well,
know?
you're a fan. You're a fan.
You're a fan, you're a fan.
You have to
Exactly.
take the good with the bad.
But I guess I don't take anything that seriously, and I probably should. And then I'd have 460,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Links are going to be in the description and all that kind of stuff to find you. And I don't think anybody needs any help finding you.
Now I'm doing a Bonnie and Clyde series right now. It's amazing, so go check it out.
Ooh, Bonnie and Clyde.
In the middle of it.
Love that. That's awesome. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you.